Chapter 1, Thursday, May 6th, 1937, 7:25 p.m., Lakehurst, New Jersey. In seconds, the Hindenburg would explode. The greatest flying machine ever built would burst into flames. It would crash to the ground in a heap of twisted metal and smoldering ash. Just minutes before, 11-year-old Hugo Ballard had been standing at the airship's huge windows. After a 3-day journey across the Atlantic, the Hindenburg was about to land. But then came a massive explosion. Kaboom! On the ground, hundreds of people have gathered to watch the landing. Now they stare in horror as the great airship erupted into a massive fireball. And inside the crippled airship, Hugo was in a fight for his life. The force of the explosive blast sent him flying back. He landed on the ground with a thickening thud. Frantic people fell on top of him, and he was nearly crushed. Someone's heavy shoe kicked his face. An elbow jabbed him in the eye. A knee pressed against his throat, making it impossible to breathe. He managed to free himself, but now the flames were everywhere. Poisonous black smoke rushed up his nose and down his throat. Tears gushed from his burning eyes. Red-hot drops of molten metal rained down, burning through his clothes and sizzling against his skin. But Hugo barely noticed the pain. He just wanted to find his parents and his little sister, Gertie. He cried out for them, but his words were smothered by the terrible noises all around. Screams of pain and panic, the shattering of glass, the crackle and roar of the flames. People smashed windows and leaped out, their terrified cries echoing as they fell through the fiery sky. Hugo clawed his way across the floor, gasping for breath. The searing heat blistered his hands and knees. He could feel the airship falling. Any second would crash to the ground. The Hindenburg was doomed. And so, it seemed, was Hugo. Chapter 2. 3 days earlier, Monday, May 3rd, 7 p.m., Rhein-Main Airfield, Frankfurt, Germany. Hugo held his 4-year-old sister Gertie tightly in his arms. They were standing in the airport waiting room. Within the hour, they'd been flying to America on the Hindenburg. Now they just had to have their backs inspected by the mean-looking German guards. No matches or light will be permitted on the Hindenburg. A soldier barked out in English and German. The guards talked in a way that made every word sound like a curse. "Why are they so worried about matches?" Mom asked nervously. Mom wasn't the jittery type. She'd shoot a deadly snake from the kitchen as if it were a ladybug. But none of them had ever flown before, and the idea of rising more than 600 feet into the sky and then flying across the Atlantic Ocean was making her nervous. Dad gave Mom a pat on the arm. "It's just because the Hindenburg is powered by hydrogen gas. It's very flammable." "Please don't remind me," Mom said, looking queasy. Dad put an arm around Mom's shoulders and pulled her close. "You don't have to worry," he said. "The Germans have a perfect safety record with those zeppelins. Right, Hugo?" He shot Hugo a look that said, "I need some help here." It's true, Mom," Hugo chimed in. He learned all he could about the Hindenburg and its sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin. Now he tried to remember some of the amazing facts he read. The Hindenburg made 34 trips across the Atlantic last year, he said, using his most expert, and the Graf Zeppelin has flown more than 1,000,000 miles without one problem. Really, Mom, the Hindenburg is the safest way to travel. Mom perked up a little bit. "That's good," she said, "but I'd still rather be on a nice big ship." "Like the Titanic?" Dad said, raising an eyebrow. Who could forget about who could forget the celebrated liner that had hit an iceberg and sunk 25 years ago? Mom frowned, but Dad had made a good point. Thousands of people had died in shipwrecks over the years, and not one person had been killed on a German passenger airship. Of course, there had been some grisly accidents on military airships over the years, fiery explosions and deadly crashes. The most terrible way of the disaster of the U.S. Navy airship that had happened just a few years ago. The Aircon had been flying off the coast of New Jersey when it was swept into a violent thunderstorm. It crashed into the ocean and more than 70 men were killed. But German airships, known as zeppelins, were different. They were famous for their safety. German pilots were the very best in the world. Hugo really didn't have the slightest worry about the Hindenburg. What he was worried about, as usual, was his little sister. Gertie wasn't feeling so well today, and now she was all teary over the dog, Panya. It turned out dogs weren't allowed in the passenger area of the Hindenburg. Just a few minutes ago, a member of the Zeppelin's crew had come to take the little one away. Panya would spend the voyage in the Hindenburg's cargo hold. Hugo didn't know who howled louder when Panya was carried off, the dog or Gertie. Gertie looked at Hugo. I miss Panya, she said, her lips trembling. I have an idea, Hugo said, straightening one of Gertie's curly pigtails. Let's go look at the zeppelin. If anything could get Gertie's mind off Panya, it was the Hindenburg.